verse 18 because that's where my Bible started and makes more sense to me. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in the hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now, and not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we were saved. But now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought, but that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. And God, who searches the heart, knows what is in the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. And now our gospel reading is from Mark chapter 1, verses 21 to 28. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, he entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Just then there was in the synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority? He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
A song now. That's right. We're going to sing this this hymn, and it's not a familiar one word-wise, but it is actually to the tune of "Morning Has Broken." It was written by a good friend of mine, Ken Rooks, by others, and bringing them into a new place and heal them. So it's called "Rose Meets Mr. Wintergarden." Now that first picture has got no words, but basically it's a picture of the community as it stands, and Rose lives in the greenhouse, and Mr. Wintergarden has the mansion next door. Just to bring you up to speed. The morning the Summers family moved into their new house, they felt at home. Faith and Rose put up their pictures. Baby Blossom watched. Mr. and Mrs. Summers planted pansies, petunias, daisies, and geraniums. Their garden was a carpet of flowers, all before the sun went down. Every morning from the roof of their house, the Summers watched the sun come up. The sun never touched the house next door. Next door, everything bristled. Next door lived Mr. Wintergarden. Sound effects are allowed. That's good. There were stories in the street about Mr. Wintergarden. "He's mean," said Emily. "And horrible," said Arthur. "He's got a dog like a wolf," said Naomi. "And a saltwater crocodile." They say he rides on his crocodile at night, said Emily. And getcha, Arthur shrieked. I don't believe you, said Rose. Anyway, don't frighten Blossom. Dad lost his football over there when he was a boy, said Emily. You can just see it through the prickles. Old and flat as a pancake. No one ever goes in there, said Arthur, in case Mr. Wintergarten eats them. If your ball ever goes over there, said Naomi, forget it. And just then, Rose's ball went straight over Mr. Wintergarten's fence. Sound effects?
No.
Rose went to tell her mum. Hey, honey bunch, mum said, you can get your ball back. Why don't you just go and ask him? Because he eats kids, said Rose. I will take in some hotcakes instead, said mum, and maybe some flowers. Mr. Wintergarten's front gate had not been opened for years. Rose heaved and pushed. The gate groaned and squeaked. Then slowly it swung open. Rose could see that there was a dog, big as a wolf. I can't see any crocodile, she said. I should hope not, replied Mum, and threw the dog a cake. Rose knocked at Mr. Wintergarten's door. Who the devil is that? Shouted a voice from inside. It's me, said Rose, and tiptoed in. What do you want? Said Mr. Wintergarten. I'm Rose Summers from next door. I've come to ask for my ball back. She twisted her fingers in her handkerchief. I bought some flowers and hot fairy cakes from my mum. Mr. Wintergarten glared at her. His dinner was cold, grey and uninviting, with bits of gristle floating in it and mosquitoes breeding on top. But Rose could see that he wasn't eating children. Please, may I look for my ball, she asked. No, growled Mr. Wintergarten. Clear off. But when Rose had gone, Mr. Wintergarten slowly pushed back his chair and did something he hadn't done in years. Mr. Wintergarten opened his curtains. He sat on his front step in the sun. No one has ever asked for their ball back, he said to himself, or bought fairy cakes. Colours coming back into his cheeks already. He saw Rose's ball and thoughtfully pushed it with his toe. Next, he did some darting movements that made his coattails fly in the sun. And then Mr. Wintergarten kicked the ball right back over the fence. Good kick, said Rose. Thank you, replied Mr. Wintergarten. Would someone mind throwing back my slipper? He added. I will, said Rose. She threw his slipper high into the air. Catch, Mr. Wintergarten, Rose called, and Mr. Wintergarten caught it. That's the end. Fence came down. Oh, Jonathan, would you like to have a read of the book while we're... Our gospel reading tells a story about a Jesus story about the healing of an outcast bloke. It is significant for Mark that it's the first healing story that he tells. So for him, it says a lot about Jesus and what was important in his ministry. What stands out to me is that Jesus approached a man who others had rejected, someone they were afraid of, didn't understand. Jesus not only approaches him, but responds in compassion to him. Jesus sees that this poor guy is not just his illness, but that he was a human being of value who needed care and healing. Come in. No? Oh, are you here for the plant swap? That's all right, we won't be long. So Jesus healed him and enabled him to become a part of society once again. He gave the man a gift of healing and peace and wholeness. So he didn't just see his illness, he listened to him and was moved to compassion and healing. I know when you look at it, it's not a soft, fluffy story. The bloke's yelling at Jesus and you get the sense that Jesus is yelling right back. But through those words, there is a reaching out for help and there is a response of compassion, no matter the shouting. Sometimes you've got to listen past the shouting. In place of the fear that other people had for him, Jesus showed acceptance and care. He modelled in this story and in other stories the importance of really seeing others as God sees them. To do this often requires us to stop our own fears and listen to the story of others. As we reflect on Australia Day, amongst other things, and this day of mourning, how we approach this time is important. Many in the media would have us approach it with anxiety, anger, or even fear. But this is an opportunity to open our hearts and listen. And when you look and reflect on what the Aboriginal community across Australia largely has been saying since the voice vote, largely their response has been to ask for space, but also for there to be a period of listening and responding in that way. So when I was searching the web in my heart for an approach to that day, I came across this Aboriginal, this First Peoples word, not Wominjeka, which is a local word for hello. It's Diddiri. I don't even know how to pronounce it, nor do I know how to pronounce the name of the people, the Nangitturungua people who are up north in around Arnhem Land. But their word is Diddiri, which means inner deep listening and quiet, still awareness. What I found was a place and a space, an Aboriginal Christian woman's website where this word came from. Her name's Miriam Rose Ungammer, and she won the Order of Australia, or whatever it is, a couple of years ago for her role in care of young people, of Aboriginal people in particular. And she runs this website which focuses around this word, Diddiri. For Aboriginal people, she says that practice involves deep listening, a spiritual skill based on respect. It's inner, quiet, still awareness and waiting, and not just for Aboriginal people, but available to everyone. When you think about it, real listening is something that transforms or can transform our relationships. If we really listen to the story of another person, friend or stranger, that is something that holds real transformative power. But let's be real, real listening is not an easy thing to do. It first of all requires us to be quiet, to stop our inner yes buts and open our hearts and our ears to the other person's story and to be prepared to be transformed by it. Archie Roach, Aboriginal singer and songwriter, most of us know anyway, said, it does. Okay. That wasn't me. Maybe if I turn the mic off. I'll turn the mic off because we don't need it. All right, we'll keep going. Hopefully the roof doesn't fall in on us. I'm going to need that on to be able to keep recording. So try taking it on, Ross. Anyway, Archie Roach said, it does wonders for a person. He probably said that too sometime. He says it does wonders for a person to be just to be still and listen to someone else talk about their life and how they probably came through things. You never know what you'll learn. So amongst other things, perhaps the first Australians can teach us about this idea of Diddiri. Deep listening describes the processes of deep and respectful listening to build community, a way of encouraging people to explore and learn from the ancient heritage of Aboriginal culture, knowledge, and understanding. Beautiful expression that this woman had on a website too from Central Australia that related to the word Diddiri is, can they bend the knees? In other words, it requires you to sit down and truly listen, a prerequisite for effectively absorbing information. But also, you know, an image of how information is passed on in that area by sitting in the red earth. All First Nations people have their own word for meditation, deep listening, knowing and reflecting. But I did find another word, but it's nowhere near as hard, nowhere near as easy to pronounce as Diddiri, so I've even left it out. But there's a couple of quotes I wanted to share with you from this Miriam Rose Anganmura Barman. She was the 2021 Senior Australian of the Year. She said, Diddiri is inner, deep listening and quiet, still awareness. Diddiri recognises the deep spring that is inside us. We call on it and it calls to us. This is the gift that Australia is thirsting for. It's something like what you call contemplation. When I experience Diddiri, I am made whole again. I can sit on the riverbank or walk through the trees. Even if someone close to me has passed away, I can find my peace in this silent awareness. There's no need of words. A big part of Diddiri is listening. In our Aboriginal way, we learnt to listen from our earliest days. We could not live good and useful lives unless we listened. This was the normal way for us to learn, not by asking questions. We learned by watching and listening, waiting, and then acting. My people are not threatened by silence. They are completely at home in it. They have lived for thousands of years with nature's quietness. My people today recognise and experience in this quietness the great life-giving spirit, the Father of us all. This Australia Day, I continue to grieve that as a nation we still struggle to tell the truth about our history and that we're still not listening to the wisdom and pain of our First Peoples. I cannot help but think that we are called as Christians to open our hearts, be vulnerable to the truth and listen with Diddiri. Yeah, maybe turn it off. Unless we want to pretend it's a surf rolling on the beach. Okay. There you go, an example of Diddiri, turning off the technology. So as we've been to another Australia Day, Invasion Day, let's use it as an opportunity to put our faith into action again, to open our ears and hearts and truly listen to the pain, the wisdom, the stories and the hopes of the First Peoples of this land. And may we know that the God who favours the oppressed is listening with us and calling us to action. I wanted to finish with that.